Okay, before we put the cylinder head on, I just want to check some of the other surfaces. We know this one's been machined, but I just want to clean up some of these other surfaces so that they're good to go. Okay, with all those surfaces cleaned up, what I want to do is just give it a good blast off with compressed air. We've had a lot of debris flying everywhere. It's likely that there's going to be stuff down in the ports and things like that, so we're going to give it a good blow off and make sure it's as clean as we can get it. Another spot I really want to throw some compressed air through is these oil galleries or these oil feeds. Just rotate the cylinder header up a little bit. So if you look up through some of these bolt holes here, or actually if you look up through this bolt hole here, oil pressure actually comes up through here, down here, and you can see a channel where it goes through in there. You want to make sure they've got no dramas with them. Okay, so in your cylinder head here, you have a small O-ring. Now this was the one that came out of it. Not going to reuse it. It's gone hard. It's almost like plastic now. It's no longer like rubber, but it was sealing just fine. The replacement one sits in there like that. Now, the issue you can have is while it's sitting in there, and when you're putting the head in and you're watching everything else, it can just pop out of place and then you lose it. So I'm going to put a small amount of silicone. Don't get too worked up here. This silicone is not to seal anything. It's just literally to help hold that O-ring in place, just so it doesn't pop out. So I'm wiping up any excess. It's just to hold that in place while we put the cylinder head in, just so I'm confident that it's not going to fall out. Okay, so we're just going to run a small bead starting down there. I have to go the other direction because I can't see what I'm putting on. Don't need a huge amount, but just a nice consistent bead all the way around. The manual did say the diameter of the bead, but that's a bit too much for me to try and figure out. I do want a nice sort of glob in and around that bottom corner there though. Okay, just double checking. Just put a little bit more down in this corner there. If you've made a mess with this, just wipe it off, start again. And again, I just want a little bit around here, this bolt hole. Done. Okay, while that silicone is just sitting there and just drying up a little bit, good time to grab our head gasket. If you haven't already, you should be kind of comparing it to the old one just to make sure that they are the same. Look, just comparing these two, there's obviously some revisions over here. It looks like it's got a few more coolant passages running through. I think that's a good idea because, well, we did overheat, didn't we? So sit your head gasket in. Now make sure you've got it in the right spot. It's pretty easy to kind of line things up and get it correct. Yeah, you don't want to make that embarrassing mistake. So we'll just sit it onto the lugs there. It's just that little bit of silicone, remember, in that corner there. And there, just making sure there's a nice blob there. Okay, final check now before we drop the cylinder head on. Gasket's the right way. We've got some silicone up around here. We've got some silicone on this little spot in here where the bolt hole is. And we've got an O-ring that's going to come and sit on there. We'll make sure that it's still attached as best as we can see as we put it in. See what happens. So what I'm going to do is just gently sit it down first. Double check my O-ring's still in place there. So yes, I'm still happy with that. Just going to carefully sit it along there, make sure everything's lined up. And just bring it along, and it should just drop down onto those little lugs. That's it there. Just sitting on those, it's just those locating lugs. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find where they are, but you don't want to smear that silicone around too much. So what I want to do now is bolt this head down, then I'll bolt this timing cover onto the head, because this timing cover has a little bit of flexibility, whereas the head is not going to shift at all. Now the head bolts, I don't want to put them in dry, and look, they are kind of oily in the way that they're packaged, but I definitely want a drop of oil just up and around the bolt hole. I definitely want some oil up and around just where this washer sits, because they can bind up there, and just putting a small smear of oil on the rest of it. We'll drop that in. Usually what I do is I kind of do them all at once. Just put a bit of oil on them, and then without dropping them, just spin them around in my hands a little bit. Now they've just got a light smear of oil on them, and then I just put a drop of oil on the head as I drop them in. Now I'm just going to wind these in. I'm not in any way tightening them up. Just literally bottoms.